eventually at some point.
All right, so we're gonna get right into it. A lot of this week went into the UI and just getting things all factored up and cleaned up for leaving phase one successfully. So what I'm gonna be doing is kind of showing you guys what's been going into that, what's still on the table, and just generally just share some of our progress. So there's gonna be a lot of a share screening today. So right off the bat, let me go ahead and let me bring up my share screen and show you guys some of the stuff we've been doing. So one of the things that we brought over from Legacy was the visual options gear. And we've been working on that over the course of the week, modernizing it and making certain things local and certain things server oriented. Like idle reload wait time, that's a server setting. Only the host can set that, and it just applies to everyone within the confines of that session. Local things like weapon range indicators, enemy icon display heights, those kind of things are essentially, even targeting lines, those are local values that clients can configure and adjust. Like you can see right there, we brought in the old legacy system of at least showing you if you highlight someone, it'll show you if you're going to shoot them. Otherwise, if you can't see them, it'll go red, exactly where the obstruction is. So you can make meaningful decisions in terms of like, oh, I can engage that target, I can't engage that target. So you can see that we got that in finally, in terms of starting to get the UI back up to the standards of what it was in Legacy. We skinned the UI and added in the icons. So you were actually able to see like your units, their classes. You can click on those icons like you could in Legacy. We got with the UI artists, it just kind of skinned the top right of like added the plane icon on the top right with the 04 up there that you see. And then the population meter, then DNA, and then cache. So we just kind of been working on that and just getting all that ironed out. And this is one of the last things that came in last night, was just showing that. One of the other things was like the weapon range indicators, which is basically when he turns that on, it just shows the circle like it used to in Legacy. So you would know just generally how far a weapon targets. This works for guard towers, it works for traditional units, anything that has a gun will visually depict its weapon range via a radial whenever you select a unit. These are all local local options, so it doesn't matter if the host sets it. Each individual client can make up their own mind in terms of basically how they want to configure that. One thing that we are looking into and seeing if we can squeeze it in there is looking at what Broken Arrow does, and basically having it to where each weapon would render a line. So you would know the MP7 cuts off, let's say at this red door, and then let's say if you had I don't know, a pistol, maybe its weapon range is a little bit less. Then you'd be able to see that when you select a unit, and you'd be able to make meaningful choices in terms of like, oh, I have an engineer, his small is on his back, but I need to be a certain distance for them to engage said target. So those are one of the things that we're looking at from Broken Arrow to kind of get some ideas in terms of like how other people have approached it. So there's a potential there for kind of like that bleeding over. I'll show a quick mock-up that we were discussing the other day real fast so you guys can get an idea for some context, and then keep moving on. Because again, a lot of this week was just the UI and making it look pretty, and then going back and forth with the concept artists and just, getting stuff situated. Let me see if I can find that. Oh no. Should be in my reports channel. Okay, I'll have to look for that because I don't see it immediately in the channel. 1 second. Okay, I'll come back to that. I have to find it. There was a mock-up that was posted, and I guess I am blind. Oh, here it is. So we were playing around with stuff like this, where the idea would be is that line in the center and the arc would be represented for each gun would have a color-coded system. So you would know, like, say the MP7 or whatever else, like, have different weapon ranges, would have different values, like this, like what Broken Arrow kind of does. So that is something that we're looking into to try and squeeze in going into Monday. To basically, this is our mock-up. This is what we made, looking at the inspiration of Broken Arrow and just doing our own thing. So that is something that we're looking at, and I'm very conscious of. If anyone has any feedback or suggestions for that, because I think that would work out great for just being able to give you actionable intel. Because every weapon has different ranges, and until now, we're the only ones that know, like, oh, the Barrett 50 cal is this range, and this is that range, and so on and so forth. And then you can see like Derek went in and kind of put in like the actual healing UI for like the health and like having it to when they get removed, the health animations, kind of putting in that final layer of paint there, polish there. Um, hold fire, putting that in there so it's represented in the actual UI, putting in the icons that they render and they get a little bit bigger or smaller based off of distance. And then just testing it to make sure everything works from the confines of a co-op multiplayer game, single player game. As you can see, an example here is that he can click on those units through walls, but he can also shift click them to select them. And then, like, let's see if I go over here, next video, this would be. Oh, I have to play the audio for this. Let me see if the audio came through. Hold on. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Oh, I'll have to play the actual game. Basically, I put the barks in. So barks are when you issue an order to someone. When you do a patrol, an attack, they see someone, they talk now. So the talking is replicated, so everyone in the game can hear it. So now, like if you're like playing, if you're like super close to your unit, and they see someone for the first time, they'll play a bark where they basically say, "Oh, I see someone," like target sighted, something along those lines, and that way everyone can hear it. So if you're playing as an operator, you're playing an RTS, they'll yell out now, and it's replicated to basically be like, "Oh, I don't want to do that," and they'll basically like replicate it in terms of like saying like, "Oh, I see something." So here, let me go and let me launch the build because I'm about to release this on public in a moment. Let me get that downloading for the update I just did. And then what I'm going to do is let me see if I can boost my volume. Otherwise, we'll have to just wait until I get to that sec. Yeah, it's just not going to be louder. Okay, so the next thing that we did, and we're going to come back to the barks. I'm going to show that live in the game. Was the early ROE, which I showed briefly before, but this was just an earlier mock-up earlier in the week. Again, we were going through the options and kind of getting everything setting up, hunting on bugs. Idle Engineer came in this week. What else was there? Yeah. And then let me go to the next one. Oh, wait, there's a loading screen that I've been working on. Let me go back. So I've been working on a loading screen that was like more friendly and more like polished, because in the early versions of the build, it would just go to a black screen and some people would panic and think that their game froze or crashed or something wonky. So one of the things that I set out to do this week, which is poorly documented. Oh my God, did they document how to do? You can do loading screens really easily in the Unreal Engine for a single player game, but the moment you do like seamless level transitions, like Ready or Not, or like Insurgency, or other games like that, you have to basically engineer everything out of the box. You have to just kind of experiment and figure out what works. And there are still some issues with this loading screen that I'm going to be working on going into next week, because there's a weird hitch that occurs sometimes if you have like a lot of assets in your level. It's doing like a load synchronously, which basically means it blocks your CPU thread. And when it does that, it basically causes it to like freeze the video because it's like focusing on the game over the actual thing. So I have to figure out how to separate it onto another thread. Is my little video, I'm gonna render that out. But like here, I'll demonstrate it from the confines of what we're doing right now. So let me pause that video. And then you see I go to co-op test map. It loads so fast that you don't even get to see it. But if I go to Half Moon Bay, you'll see it. But again, the issue is that it freezes right there because you figure it's a game thread versus a slate thread issue. Because I'm investigating that right now. At least it's a little bit better than the alternative. I might just change it to a static image for the time being until I can research that and figure out the best workflow. Because traditionally, the Unreal Engine wants you to have like a 3D model, like a 3D scene for like it, and not have any widgets. Or if you do have widgets, they're so simplistic and basic, like in Fortnite, where it's just they throw up a 2D texture and then that's it. That's all they do. So it's one of those things that I'm looking into that going into Monday and just kind of figuring out the best approach that gets the job done, and it gets the idea across of like, hey, we're loading, whether you be a client, whether you be the server, listen server in this situation. And then one of the other things that we did is, oh my god, those icons, you have no idea how many times we'd be playing in co-op, and it'd be like a blind bat trying to figure out where your engineers are, or winters, or your operators, or your snipers, whatever. So we finally got that in from Legacy, and if I click on them, then I can select them through the buildings, so there's no issue there. And if I'm really good at clicking, then I can shift click them and make a selection. Then they populate that bottom right hemisphere. And if I press tab, it'll auto lock me to them. And then I can, tell them to move and pause the game, and it'll just follow them for me. And if I click on him and tab to him, then boom, one tab to stop the last cancel, one tab to start the new follow. So it's one of those things where like you figure it's been UI, and more UI, and just kind of looking at years of feedback and just seeing what else needs to be addressed or resolved going into it. You'll see that these three, this is objectives, this is diplomacy, this is doctrines, are currently like coming soon, obviously, because of the roadmap switch. We're doing pandemic first. So like this is probably another day or so of just bottom of the barrel RTS stuff we have to do. Like there's still some visual options that we're missing here, but he needs to kind of go through, and I need to kind of go through with him and kind of get all this set up. Like if I do this, and I cannot tell you how useful this is. Like it is so freaking useful now. And that like we dealt with some issues earlier in the week of like visibility. Like we were testing with people on Discord, and they were saying that the icons were too dark or they were kind of blurry because of anti-aliasing. So we were just kind of going through and just kind of testing everything and sprucing it up, and then just making tweaks where needed, so we could get the visual like accuracy that we need, so people can like make meaningful decisions really quickly. Because the idea is with those icons, different classes are assigned different colors, like they were in Legacy. So your special infected, each one has a special color. Your stand-in infected, each one has a special color. And along that vector, then you're able to basically like see what's going on per se, in terms of like, oh, there's stand-in infected coming in here, but there's a blow up guy and a spitter coming that way, and so on and so forth, this way and that way and this way and that way and that way and that way. So that's one of the biggest things is for us is to basically like get that level of accessibility back into the game, like the idle engineer button, where if they're not building something, then in essence they're idle, because their job as an engineer is to build. They can use the small and everything else great to a certain degree, but for the most part, like their primary role is: are you building something? You're not. Then we're going to register you to a global list. So if someone looks for an RTS, engineer, they can, and they can click through it, find one. Like, oh, like John's using Kevin, but no one's using Jason. So they can click that and then immediately go and build whatever they're going to build, and then Bob's your uncle. Everyone's happy. So that was something else that we got in this week, just to kind of get that, like the depth in there from Legacy. So it's finally starting to hit the point where we're happy with the UI. I mean, people that weren't here last week, you can see how the zones work for power, where yeah, you have like your little zone card like in Legacy, but then you, instead of having that ugly window that was above every building, it's in the details panel like it should be. And then if you're over here and you want to go back to that structure, you can click on its icon or its emblem, because each structure and every unit's going to have there's a backlog right now of getting every structure like 2D art, like the characters like this, like that. So as they get those backlogs filled, then you'll start to see the Cirque Eagle replaced with that. And then you can like click on this and remember like, oh, or you can hotkey it like that. And then you can click on it there. So we're giving you a lot of options of ways to basically be able to like manage stuff. And then you can drag between groups like that too. So I think it's a solid evolution in terms of basically as we've kind of been working on it. There are definitely going to be some bugs with the UX. So as you run into them, let us know. Talk to us on Discord. Talk to us on Steam. So then that way we can engage with you guys and try and hunt these down as soon as possible. Because it is the utmost priority for us to get the pandemic at this point, and that is peeling down onto just finishing everything that we started originally in phase 1 to a level that is satisfactory for us. There's a level that is satisfactory for our community in terms of the bugs, in terms of the performance. There's been a lot of changes here and there in terms of kind of ironing this out and getting everything fleshed out and working. So you figure like, here, I'll bring up my list. Let me bring up my Trello, and you can see what is currently on the docket. So, yeah, here it is. So this is currently what we're working through. This is currently what we're working through to basically get the UI in a place where we're happy, where it's like the pause menu is next up. So you figure right now, there's a couple of elements that are missing. Some of these can't be done, like the mortars, visual tab for DNA, wool building status, civilian squad orders, build occupancy lenses, zone border visibility, and zone status. Those can be done. Turret UI can be done. But then these are being post-stated for pandemic when we implement those. And then at that point, it's the pause menu of implementing this mockup, getting the keybind set up so you can actually change your keybinds, graying out controller, graying out accessibility, putting in the options and sorting them between HUD, audio, graphics, display, and gameplay. I mean, you figure the options should be fairly straightforward because most of that we can bring over from the legacy project from the C++. So that should be pretty seamless in terms of bringing over the options on the main menu. For the main menu, we're pretty much just looking at the old main menu that we had on experimental and then just up converting that to like the new approach of like how we do our UI and everything else, which would be, where is it? Let me find it. This one. Let me find one I didn't draw on. That'll be fine. So like this is basically the main menu that we're looking at porting and basically just streamlining to make it easier to work with, where it's like turning these two elements here that are sliders into C++ backends, so it's easier to talk to them. And then one of the other things that we're looking at doing is having it to where when you first launch into the hub, because it's been really confusing for some people to start as the operator from the onset, is having it to where like you get like a traditional Half-Life 2 type of menu like this. And then there's going to be a button down here that basically says load in the hub. So then that way you can walk around and explore the hub with your friends while you're waiting for the host to like stage, or the host can do it. But each individual player can make that choice if they want to go into the hub, talk to the quartermaster, or just explore the hub. So that is something that we're tangibly moving towards, and we're reactive in terms of basically like, okay, like some people don't want to even engage with the operator, they don't even care it exists. Fair. So we're going to accommodate that by basically just having it to where when you load into the hub, I'm gonna go back to it. Instead of going here, you would go to like a bird's eye view. Let me go into debug mode. It would be equal sign. No, it would be dab. So instead of like loading in there, we'll probably set up like a perspective like right here or somewhere over here. But it's like a more of a traditional main menu. And then if you press a button, you already have an operator because we assign every player in the hub an operator anyway as a personal like thingy. But we'll find some kind of camera perspective that Dimitri will set up. And that would be for like people that just don't even want to engage with the operator. They don't have to. And then if they want to, they can press that key and it will just jump them to the body that we already spawned for them in the hub. That way everyone's happy. And then you can see your friends that are being like monsters just running around the island shooting up a storm. I'll briefly go over this, but like if I go to the quartermaster, you'll notice that Michael has been working on basically just getting in the last of the backlog for the weapons for the base ones. So the M14 got all of their attachments. And here, let me level up my gun. Oh, did they block out my console command? Hold on. Okay, I'll have to check that. I don't know why it's not doing my console command now. But the idea is that you figure as you level up these guns, you'd be able to... Do I have a higher one? I have you. You can see like the different attachments on the guns, and just generally being able to change out the stats and all that. So he's been kind of going through and just finishing up his backlog, setting up the recoil, and just making sure everything works, and then taking into consideration feedback people have been giving him over the last couple of like weeks, as we've been just kind of like play testing and talking to people. Let me go ahead and let me go to resume. So let me go to. Let me pick up my notes because there was a couple other things I need to go over for this week. So give me a moment. Let's see. Oh, right. I need to cover that. So I'm going to open up my SDK. So let me go to you and open Sesame. And while that loads up, there's a couple other things I'm going to show you guys what we've been working on for pandemic stuff. Or rather, what I've been working on to kind of set up the foundation. Oh, is it still loading? Oh, it loaded. Okay. So one of the things that we've been doing is porting over our world building system, which would be you. It's simple enough in base value, but it's just having the support there because we're sometime next week around Tuesday to Wednesday. Once I give the final approval, then Efren and them are going to be porting over the world buildings from the legacy project over to this one. And that's in excess of a couple hundred plus buildings. So we're just streamlining and setting up the actual buildings themselves and mocking them up and making sure that like if I click on them, it shows their details. What detail does it show? You know, because like down here is going to be cleanse. It's going to be, you know, like evacuate. Like that's going to be here instead of having that stupid little custom pop-up that we had in Legacy. So that's something that we're just kind of going through and just kind of ironing out and just making sure that like, okay, how are we showing this information? What kind of information shows here? And then just making sure that the actual boxes around them are rendering properly. So we're just kind of going through that backlog and just kind of setting up the prerequisite stuff before we scale up. Because like we're looking at Half Moon Bay or a base pandemic map, and we're trying to decide which one would be the best for building pandemic as a whole and establishing that as a benchmark of all the mechanics and systems. Because we've gotten a lot of people on Steam just saying, fuck adding new maps. Just do one map, do that map extraordinarily well, then worry about getting the three to four other maps that are on your guys' list. Like it's nice to have Half Moon Bay. It's nice to have Treasure Island. It's nice to have, you know, like maybe the Calypso. That's more work. You're spreading yourself thin. There's 2 programmers. There's 2 level designers. So that's what the people on the Steam forums thread have been very vocal about in the last week, and I agree with them there. So you figure it's one of those things where I'm going to pick a map. I think it's going to be Half Moon Bay. But regardless, on the back end, we're going to start porting over Calypso and Pandemic and getting them staged and set up in the SDK. So that way, technically all the assets are there, and whatever we learn or whatever we change or establish in Half Moon Bay will be a trickle-down effect to those other maps, per se. So that's generally the approach that we're taking there when it comes down to just, you know, getting over the pandemic. And what I'll do is let me load up the post and see if I can find it. So I pretty much have been using this thread here to kind of update people in terms of basically like what's going on in terms of like progress. I'm going to be posting a Steam post ideally in the next couple of days. I'm waiting for a couple more things to come in so I can just announce that phase 1 is done. That's a lot of people playing. So you figure ideally the moment we get to a point of phase 1 being done, then we will post a Steam post, update you guys, and then post a new roadmap so you guys can see what the workflow is going to be. Because right now, I would say we're looking at Tuesday, Wednesday. It's going to be Monday to ideally finish the rest of our TS. And then at that point we set pause. That'll be Tuesday-ish. Pause and main menu will be Tuesday, Wednesday, ideally one night. We'll see. We have to put in the keybinds this time around. So Tuesday, Wednesday, do the keybinds, do the pause menu, do the main menu, make sure the graphics options are working. So Wednesday would be around the time that we'd aim to kind of be done and out of phase 1. And then Wednesday to the 13th to the 14th is when we would aim to start the helicopters. and basically still be able to show you guys that progress. Just keep in mind that's the rough trajectory we're going to. Things can change based off of feedback, issues that we run into, and X, Y, and Z. But that's the rough trajectory there when it comes down to our plans. Let me pull up my list here. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have for this week. Everything was pretty much just UI optimization, doing the visual options, doing the loading screen, and then yeah, so that pretty much took up all of our week. So then at that point, I guess we're gonna just segue right into questions and just kind of go from there. So let me go ahead and see if there's any questions on Discord or any questions on YouTube. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask your questions in chat or raise your hand to basically ask any questions that way. Let's see what we have here. Oh, I guess Derek just snuck in. What's up, Derek? It's going.
How goes the war?
I just finished the update for this week. I don't know if there's anything to add from what you were working on just now.
Pretty much just have been hammering out user interface related things, including the rules of engagement tab at the top left, and re-implementing features related to that, such as well, you probably went over it already, but the weapon range indicators as well as the targeting lines for when you highlight an enemy while you have units selected. Also, just recently today implemented save and load for that. So when you set up your rules of engagement, that you should save and load between sessions, so you don't have to customize it every single time. Although the idle reload time right now just respects the hosts, so you can't customize that unless you're the host right now.
Oh, you're fine. You're
sorry.
fine. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
No, that's pretty much what I've been hammering away at, is getting through the user interface and tangentially related things
so
to
one
that.
of the things I was going to say also is Michael's moving around his schedule, so he'll be joining us on Saturdays from now on, and about a week or two from now. So you'll have at least one more dev, so you guys don't always have to hear from me every single day. Let me see. And I'll put it out there anyway, because the time zone change really screwed up our Australian host. If there's anyone that actually wants to help host, but they preferably and is okay with this time zone, do consider contacting me on YouTube or on Discord if you want to help out, lead the conversation, and just kind of help me run these per se, because I could use the help. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. So I guess we'll go to questions and see what we have there. What will that happen for things like the scout drone? What do you mean by that, Wolf? Oh, here he left. So I'm assuming that will that happen for things like the scout drone? Yeah, I don't know what that means. The barking? No. The scout drone won't have any barking. It'll be pretty much just to the RTS. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the scout drone will have that. I thought you were talking about the ones that are the avatars for the characters. I'm sorry. So what I'm going to do is let me load into the co-op test map. And then you'll see that when you can hear them talking now. So I'm going to switch over to share screen. Let me fix my audio. Oh, that's why.
I love hard work. Repairing. You bet ya.
I've had better days. Who's hurt? Patrol marked.
Build all day, party all night.
The sound isn't on for the stream, it seems like.
It doesn't work on Discord. You have to hold on.
Give me an order. Easy as pie. Easy fix. As you command.
Billboards of the little icon before seeing them when you're zoomed out enough. Some updating to the behind the scenes stuff for how that stuff's handled, so now they are a lot clearer and easier to read even when you're zoomed out a lot. Chainswords would be nice, but I think that went to the nuke budget. Oh, Robert, is your microphone still working?
I'm just playing, trying not to die.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
One thing I would
Wanted
say
to make
is
sure
just
that- or
notice
that-
that it doesn't turn red when they when you highlight someone through a wall.
Roger that. I only
That's
just
what I
recently
figured.
implemented it, so you're the first one to be taking it fully into testing. I've been hammering it away inside the UI mines, so to
that's what I
speak.
figured. So you figure like this is just pretty much just hot off the presses in terms of things that we're working on going into the podcast today. So just keep in mind there's already a couple of issues that I see. I have to make a couple of quick changes before I release this build because it looked like there was an artist that changed the horde map but then didn't rebuild the navigation, which is why when I was playing in that map earlier, it didn't. No one was moving on the horde map, so I'm gonna have to talk to my artist that worked on that. But regardless, I'll fix that, and then I'll ship a build out to public HQ or whatever. So then that way you guys have something you can play. You can try out the UI, tell us what you think. I mean, we're on a tight time crunch here, so like, ideally you guys can try it out tonight, going into Monday, Tuesday. Give us any feedback Monday, ideally, because come Monday or Tuesday, it's hell or high water. Moving on to the pause menu, the main menu, and then starting helicopters. Like we have to just roll. Because in our mind, we need to try and get something playable for Pandemic by the end of this month. And that means that like helicopters like shouldn't take us longer than a week and change, ideally. And then the rest of the month is going to be the fundamentals of Pandemic, custom game options, and just getting in the base classes and then doing the Juggernaut and Chelsea and Lieutenants, and that'll round out this month with some bleed over, I'm sure. So just keep in mind, like, we're working as diligently as possible. Yeah, I knew it. It was the fucking native. So let me just build that, commit it onto my repository, then I'll cook that build out, test it, and then put it out for you guys to play over the weekend. This podcast is going to be kind of short based off of just, there's a lot of work, but I was able to show it too quickly based off of it's all UI, and it's hard to inflate. There's no point in inflating that. So anyway, let's go back to questions. Is there anything that you guys have before we wrap it up and I go work on some stuff or getting a build out to you guys? Jen asked the question. In the hub, could a player instead display as a drone if they're peripheral against operators? Could still interact with the hub, but have a bit more flavor. Huh. Derek, what do you think about that from a technical standpoint?
I don't see why not, really. Because you're allowed to do that if you just want to scroll around in
We would have
RTS
to
view.
change.
It would require a little bit. It would require a little bit more design changes, and potentially we'd have to spend some time figuring out invisible roof stuff for parts of the prison more than
fixed that.
RTS mode. But we probably have to do that anyway.
I redid the way that the RTS cameras do collision. So as long as Dimitri put proper collision on the main hole, we wouldn't have to worry about that. The primary concern is that we would have to make it a gameplay mode per se, because they would start an RTS and then they'd have to find, and then they would have to we'd have to have like some kind of pseudo mode where they could switch to their operator or have a pre-placed spawn operator just in the hub. Let me think about that, because there's a couple of technical aspects of that where I'm more keen on you spawn in an RTS, which is just your traditional Half-Life 2 menu, like or like what's that? I can't think of the game right now. But basically, like, your Half-Life 2 menu, your traditional RTS menu, and then you just have a button where it's like go explore hub. Explore operator mode, explore hub, because that works within the gameplay flow we've already established. It's very easy for us to implement, and that way we can keep our velocity or our trajectory towards getting the Pandemic in a lively, like, timely fashion. Because my understanding is that based off of the poll and everything else, that's everyone's priority instead of over horde mode. Where horde mode is more like the dessert, Pandemic is the main course. Let's see what else we have for questions. Can the zombies make bridges over water out of themselves like the ants yet? No. For the time being, we'll look at that when we get into pandemic for the bridge combat. Is that we have to figure out how we're going to tackle that this time around because there needs to be a more long-term solution. We have some things that we've experimented in the co-op test map in terms of verticality and climbing and going in and out of rooftops. I don't have an answer on that just yet, but it is something that we have to address going into the pandemic rebuild. Is because bridges were just too strong. You blow one up, it's over GG. We had the birds, we had the leviathans, but once you turned them off, the game was easy. Standard infected spitters, blow up guys. They needed some way of traversing that didn't require a unit you could disable. That just shuts off the entire game in the easy mode. So it's one of those things that we'll be looking into. We'll be basically coming out with the conclusion for that either at the end of this month or resolution. Either at the end of this month or the beginning of next month after we have the base onset of pandemic baked in. Is my utmost priority right now is getting it back to like the base framework of you spawn on this map, you have the carrier, you have helicopters with the weapons so you can build and all that. You have Chelsea, you have lieutenants, you have custom game options. You can make this entire Half Moon Bay area your playground to experiment with settings, share those files with other people, and be able to make like quick runs like Romero's Dawn of the Dead or like, 28 weeks later where you can change their health, slow them down, that kind of stuff. This time around, we want to take what we built in the original pandemic and up the ante a little bit there. So that's really important to us based off of just Derek's modding back history and a lot of other people's history of modding, where it's like small little things that we can change from the custom game options where you can get a little bit more mileage out of the game and make it cater to how you want to play the game. Zombie catapults, hell no. So, is there any other questions we have from anyone? And let me save this, plan the map, and verify it before I put that build out for you guys to play. Oh, a couple questions coming in, so I'll wait for those. So Jen asks, regarding the bridges, you could have some sort of infrastructure destruction penalty. CERC gets funds for rescuing civilians, assuming you lose funds in some lenient way for indiscriminate destruction of bridges or buildings or whatnot. Obviously not a priority, but something to consider. Let me think about that because, hold on. Yeah, now they're moving. Okay. Yeah, so it was a navigation issue. Let me save that. Yeah.
For that one, just off the top of my head, for the penalties for bridge destruction, that might be something good to implement, but at the same time, it wouldn't fundamentally fix the infected's inability to counter it at a lot of stages of the game. Because while destroying the bridges should be able to give you a short-term benefit, if you do it, because that is a feature that should be utilized by players who are aware of it and who want to utilize that as a temporary wall or things like that. But the infection should be able to adapt to that so that the infected aren't going to just be stonewalled by a lack of floor.
They get because like then you get the issues that you used to have on the old Company of Heroes 2 maps and Company of Heroes 1 maps, where it becomes like basically not even a stalemate. It's like you're just building up an armada to the point where you're just going to invade. And there's nothing they can do. You just build so many nefs or the housers or whatever I forget they're called from Company of Heroes 1 2, but you build enough artillery, you build airborne, you just start dropping them in, you overrun them, and then at that point it's GG. Like you've achieved critical mass. So it's one of those things that they're very conscious of, or we don't want to make it. Because the problem is that you figure tactics like that are part of the charm of the game. Is that you figure you destroying that bridge is also an inconvenience to you because you can't get your units across it. And in some cases, your units could be on the opposite side, and you have to blow it up just to buy yourself time. So we want people to be able to make those meaningful choices and not feel like they're penalized for using those kind of tactics. I feel like the better resolution is something more long-term, like them being able to swim, them being able to build their own infection growth that like latches on and builds across the way. Being able to it'd be swimming, it would be infection growth. Those are the two biggest things, or maybe just being able to like the spitters can jump over the gap or whatever. Because like one of the big things that we're setting out to do is that the destruction system is going to be changed for the bridges to where we have it to where like you can click on a bridge and see its physical health, like in Company of Heroes, which is like that helps out a great amount for being able to see like where's the bridge in terms of its health. Is it about to blow up? And am I damaging it indirectly by shooting at people? Because in Legacy, in this version as well, we had it to where like if a javelin or a small or like even a tank where you like hit something on a bridge, it would apply a very small, tiny amount of damage to the bridge itself, the structural integrity. It wasn't as much as like if you did a direct fire on it, but if you did it enough, your bridge would degrade and break eventually. Because we were kind of simulating, well, maybe some of the shells actually hit the actual bridge. Plus, I mean, destroying that much stuff on the top of the bridge is going to have far-reaching implications anyway to its structure integrity from all the explosions. So I feel like we need to go down to that direction, that vector for the infected this time around, and reuse some of the infection growths, add collision to them, and simply just have it to where it just like bridges the gap. Or they can jump off the bridges or go off on beaches and be able to traverse over the water and just have a total war type of like what's it called? It's an attrition system. But basically it's like a total war siege system where when they climb the walls, there's a percentage of some of them die or they take damage. So then that way like they always have to have larger numbers to actually like be like competent to actually be able to inflict damage. And if you have helicopters on patrol or other units guarding some of your other areas that are like beaches, then that would be the counter towards that strategy. So that way at least keeps you on your toes. And the first time you'll learn the hard way of like, oh, they can just jump off the bridge, or they could just go on a beach or jump off this point, land into the water and swim, which is what we know how to do that now from the navlinks in the game. So it is one of those things that we're looking into long term. We're going to have that discussion when we introduce the bridges via the older Treasure Island map. Again, my thing is I want to do Half Moon Bay because it's not that complicated from a design standpoint, and we don't have the bridges and like the really, really large, complicated like slope that we would have in the previous one. So that way we can fundamentally streamline and benchmark like evacuation. Dynamic civilian groups, ambient civilians, people that walk around the city and populate it. Chelsea, the infected, the custom game settings, and then when we're happy with those, then we would bring on the old map, and then from there bring in San Francisco North at that point. So then that way you guys have a larger breadth of content there. So that's the general game plan. Let's see if there's any other questions. So Apollo asked or said, zombies can bloat themselves like water floaties and then slow paddle to the other shoreline, use heli patrols to try and intercept them. The heli patrols is something that I've been talking about for years. It was one of those things where I want to look into implementing to basically like bring that full circle, because I don't like the bridge strategy. I don't like how everything comes down the bridges. It makes the game boring and it makes the game easy. You blow up one or two bridges and then you can just sit there and turtle for the rest of the game. You build a couple of repeaters, and then there's no real strategy anymore. You just build up critical mass, build up your money, and then send in raids and eventually hunt down and kill Chelsea. There needs to be some skin in the game. There needs to be something that forces you to get out of your comfort zone and actually push out into these red zones and try and save people, some kind of incentive. So again, once we get the base fundamentals in, those are the things they'll be looking at to address and to basically get like situated. Would be cool if the bridge degrades as its weight is reduced. So if you send a convoy over a damaged bridge, it would just collapse and destroy the vehicle atop it. Adds more risk to fighting on a bridge too. When we had it in Legacy, the bridges had preset points similar to Company of Heroes, where like only a certain segment of it could be destroyed. Let me think about that. That's not a bad idea. I'll put that on my wish list for something to consider when we get the vehicles. Because right now the current trajectory is helicopters, base pandemic, civilian evacuation, dynamic civilian groups, ambient civilians, and then the vehicles, the ground vehicles. and all the other stuff, like the Hummer, the Abrams, the Bradley, and bring all those over. So then that way we can get you guys the mode that you want, and then we can, at that point, it'll buy us some time to implementing in the ground vehicles again and convert over that code that Derek wrote. And that's the other thing, is that the Juggernaut is also another thing, because from what we learned on the co-op test map and what we're going to be applying to this map, we're going to be changing the way that some of the infected climb and go into structures and making it a little bit more adaptable and manageable. Because the test, if anything, the test on the co-op test map made it a little bit overwhelming. So we're going to be changing a couple of things here and there and how we use the navlings and how we're like having spitters and standard infected enter buildings jumping around. The Juggernaut will definitely be benefiting from those systems by being able to jump on rooftops or just being able to jump over certain things. Like we'll have our level designers go through a map like Half Moon Bay and basically hyper optimize it to be able to be like, okay, like Juggernauts can use these, spitters can use these, standard infected use those, and then that way it makes it where like when you see it infected, there's a different tool set, different ability, a different way they play, so it warrants different strategies, different things to keep in mind. So that is the vector, the direction we're going in when it comes to that. Let me see if there's anything else. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so then what I'm going to say is give me a good like 10 to 15 minutes. I'll release a build, the public HQ. Fuck it, I'll just put up patch notes. I mean, you figure even if I get some flack that we're not done with phase 1, with the patch, I need to just put up the patch notes anyway. So I'll put up the patch notes, basically documenting everything with some GIFs and videos so you guys can see everything that's changed. And again, like I highly encourage everyone, go in, play it, see how they like it, and leave their feedback somewhere we can find, whether it be on Steam or on Discord. Discord's preferred, but I know people love their Steam, and that's perfectly fine. So I'll do my best to hunt all those down and archive them, or look at them going into Monday, Tuesday. So again, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you guys coming in, just kind of seeing what we were working on. We'll be here again next week at the same time. If you want to consider supporting development further, consider checking out our Patreon, consider checking out our Discord pledge system, or the support packs we have on Steam, or the book. They all help out, and they all allow us to basically focus the game more over our day jobs. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And again, keep your eye out on Steam, and there should be about a 1 gigabyte update in the next 10 minutes. Have a good one.